Agencies Drinking Beer is brought to you by Proposify, software that helps agencies streamline their proposals in the cloud and get faster sign-off.
Welcome to the 17th episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. On today's episode, we're going to chat with Ariel Castro. He's the Director of Accounts at White Rabbit. They're a full-service creative agency based in Reno, Nevada. We're going to be talking about how to manage client expectations. There. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You're off the coffee, so you're a little crusty today?
Yeah, I'm getting off the coffee, so day one.
Day one?
Headaches. It's what everybody says, it's textbook.
And here I am drinking beer in front of you, and you said no.
Yeah, well.
I even, held it in front of your face. Really tried to tempt you. I'm the devil.
Not really. I was the devil while my dad was in town. Lots of partying going on. So.
Yeah, you had your 75-year-old dad? Is he 75?
He'll be 76 this month in about 4 days.
Wow, and he's still running marathons.
Oh, he's a wild man. And he was on death's bed 8 months ago.
I know, a branch fell on him.
Huge branch.
That's crazy.
Crushed him, neck issues, concussion. He's definitely not himself. He's still recovering.
I wouldn't have known it by seeing him the other day.
Yeah. He's doing
you guys are like twins, eh?
No.
I said I know. Everyone's going to fucking laugh at me. Anyway, what?
I don't see the reason. I mean, mannerisms maybe, but which is kind of weird because I didn't grow up with them. But I guess we're a bit alike. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys look a lot the same, so that's all I have to say. But we're here in our new office.
Oh, that's the big news.
That is big news. Probably not to anyone else, but to us, it's big news. We're in a new office. It's air-conditioned because we're in the dead of summer. And I know, if you're not from Canada, you're probably thinking it's cold here all the time. No, it's really hot in the summer, in Nova Scotia anyway. And it was pretty brutal at the old office.
No air, lots of issues, but now we have beautiful views of the harbor.
I know. I wish everyone could see this.
Yeah.
So, and we saw a ghost ship the other day. You weren't here for that.
I saw the pictures.
You saw the pictures. We were here looking out at the Halifax Harbor. I believe the biggest open harbor in the world. I could be wrong about that.
It's the third deepest natural harbor in the world.
All right. Well, it's not
Same
as impressive.
But that's cool.
It's a big harbor anyway. So it was really foggy, and out of the, through the fog, we looked all out the window, and we saw a tall ship with, sails out, which was creepy.
It's an amazing picture, actually.
It was cool.
I like it.
And then later that night, there was, lightning and stuff for hours, just lightning flashing like crazy.
You should put that picture on the post.
Yeah, I will.
I think you should.
I probably will forget.
Remind
me.
I will, yeah.
Okay. So, I don't think we have a whole lot to chat about this week about anything in particular. So we're going to get into, we talked with Ariel Castro a few weeks ago. We giggle a bit about the name. It's a unique name.
We had to smoke Cuban cigars while we did the interview, along with drinking beer.
Yeah, and, the mermaid Cuban dictator combination, that visual is just etched into my mind. I'm picturing Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
Captain Designer.
I know.
Captain Creative.
I want to put that on the little promo pic. Think people will like that?
I think people will like it, but I don't think Ariel, he may not like it too much.
Well, I suppose he'd want to be a merman, not a mermaid, but... speaking of Cuban dictators, America can now deal with Cuba.
Yep.
That's pretty
huge.
That's a landmark. As an American, what do you think of that?
I never had a problem with Cuba. I had friends from Boston that used to go to Cuba. They'd go to Montreal, and then they'd go to Cuba and we can get their passports stamped. I have no problem with it.
What a hassle that is.
Oh, it is, yeah.
I remember I went to Cuba once on vacation, which we've always been allowed as Canadians, and there was no Americans nearby because everybody was either from Canada or the UK. Yeah.
It was,
and now they're going to be all those Yankees are going to be flooding our
and it's going to raise the
resorts.
prices and
with their hamburgers and such.
Well, I think what's happened too is the dictatorship. I mean, no one's like Castro was, right? I mean, there's a reason why people defect from a place. It was. I mean, let's face it. You go there on vacation and it's poverty. You know, it's
You wouldn't know that in the resorts, but
no, but it is. I mean, it's pretty bad.
yeah. I had locals who were working there, and they would make me. Well, they wouldn't make me. They would encourage me to like get them some of the free beer and leave it on a tree stump, and then they would give me like fresh coconuts with a straw in it.
If you did that,
Yeah.
you know what happened if they got caught?
Yeah, they'd probably get in shit. But it was worth it for the beer, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, cold beer on a hot day in Cuba, nothing like it.
It's worth jail time.
It's worth removing your hand for.
Things we take for granted, eh?
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's get into the interview with Castro here. I mean, you know,
It's a good one.
it's good.
Yep.
So let's hear what Ariel has to say.
Here we go.
We're talking with Ariel Castro today on the podcast. Ariel is the account director. Is that the right title? Is that the title you go by? Account director?
Director of account.
Oh, cool. Okay. So you're the director of accounts at White Rabbit, based in Reno, Nevada, and you guys are a creative agency, and you do a whole bunch of cool stuff, even investing, which I'd love to learn more about. But first of all, thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kyle. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here.
So as I understand it, we're I think 3 hours ahead of you, and you've been drunk since 9 a.m. this morning. Is that what we're telling your boss?
That's exactly right. And in fact, I'm about to have my fifth one right now.
Fifth?
Oh,
man.
that sounds nice. Now, most important question of the day is, what are you drinking?
This is a Sierra Nevada Nooner Pilsner.
Oh, I like the nooner thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not noon yet, though. It's only 10:24 a.m., and it was really hard to smuggle all these beers past about 30 people.
But any time is good.
And you got 5. This is your 5th into you by 10:24. Oh.
I like the way you roll, man. I want to hang out with you.
I'm just joking. I didn't have 5 this time. This is my first one.
You should have kept that fantasy going. Man. Okay. Well, we have some catching up to do.
Yeah, we do.
But let's get into it. Let's chat. I know you've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So you're the director of accounts at White Rabbit. So let me know kind of what do you do? What's your role there? What's your average day look like?
Sure. So I'm the director of accounts, and my job is basically on paper it's account management. So I have to talk to the clients, manage expectations, do direct sales, do upsells, cross sells. Manage expectations and introductions with other clients. I have to manage vendors. So when we're, let's say we have to have a T-shirt printed for a given client, I have to manage the pricing, send the quotes, manage the quotes. So a majority of what I do is sales operations.
Cool. Awesome. And so there's other account managers then that report to you and you kind of oversee what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So what's that like anyway? I mean, I've never had that role myself in an agency. I know, Kevin, you have sort of been an account guy at agencies before, but how do you sort of define a process that other people have to, like you talked about doing upsells and cross sells? Is that something that you kind of have to manage or oversee what other people are doing and maybe find some opportunities that are they're not fully taking advantage of?
It's actually, I don't actually do a lot of the personal upselling myself. I'm fortunate that our team is really capable, and a lot of them are really entrepreneurial guys that have started their own businesses, that have sold their own businesses, that own their own businesses on the side. And many of them are, hustlers in their own right. They're really accomplished guys, and I trust them to manage clients well and to introduce them to our other offerings when the time is right. So fortunately, I don't have to do a lot of that myself. I do assist with that in terms of scoping out projects. When there's something that's technical that needs to be, let's say that we're developing a web app or a mobile application, and there's a change order for a new feature, for example. So the account executive or the broker, the salesperson, will talk to the client who will express interest in a certain change, and then we have to figure out, okay, how are we going to execute that? How are we going to figure out what technical requirements are necessary for this job? How much time is it going to take us? And oftentimes this has to happen really fast because the account executive will call me and say, Ariel, client X wants to do Y. What do we have to do? And we have to strike while the iron's hot. So there's a lot of thinking on the fly and collaborating really quickly with our sales and account team.
A lot of crossover to project management then, it sounds like.
Yeah. We do wear a lot of hats here. That's always been our MO. All of our guys are really multi-talented. Our CEO was in news production and video production before. Then he got into marketing, developing apps and websites. Our CTO is often coding himself on client projects. So we're all pretty hands-on, and because we're multi-talented, we dive into, whenever there's a hole that needs to be filled or an opportunity, we can dive in. So that's a strength of our team, but also, you could see that as a weakness because we can't very highly specialize to the extent that we have to do different tasks. But on the whole, I think it's great because I trust my team members to be able to execute in lots of different capacities, and I know that I don't need to hold their hand through certain tasks.
Well, going back to what you said about your account team, being entrepreneurs, it's obvious looking at your client list that you do have kind of an all-star account sales team in place.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that we pretty much have zero marketing budget. We don't spend any, I don't want to say zero, close to zero outbound marketing budget. So we don't really go out of our way to present ourselves to people. And a majority of what we do is referral based at this point, which is really good. I think it took us a long time to get to that point, but right now it's working out really well. And we get to conversations at a point where we have already been introduced in a certain way, and you could think of it essentially as a warm lead. So that's typically how we do our sales, and our account and sales team is really fortunate that they're introduced to people already as an authority, already with the trust of that other person bringing them in in a relationship sort of way.
And you're building a lot of products for people, a lot of web apps and mobile apps and that kind of thing. And you talked a few minutes ago about when somebody needs a project and you scope it out and you present it and then manage, scope creep and change orders and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, boy.
This was a really, I'm sure I know why you're laughing, because this was a big challenge when we used to run Headspace, was if we had a big project that was not like, doing an audit or building a simple marketing site, but if actually building a real, application was such a challenge because what clients expected, you never have all the answers up front. You never know exactly what you're building until you really get into it, and then it's such a hard thing to pitch and scope out and price. Tell us your secrets. How does this work?
Oh, okay. So we definitely have to do a lot of expectation management up front, and part of that is essentially just having the discussion with the client in a very transparent way to define what a change order is. And the way that I do that, I have a strategy of doing this, and I do this all the time, and it seems to work with 90% of people. So I'll let you guys know how I do this. I describe building highly technical web products, mobile apps, even marketing campaigns, sort of like building a house. So this seems to be something that resonates with people because they understand the process of hiring a contractor and having a variety of different teams to come in. You have a different team that does the foundation than the team that does the drywall or the paint or the windows or the roof. So they understand the process of having a multi-talented team come in. And as it relates to change orders, what I always say is that if you're building a house and when you're halfway through a house, you say, I actually want to build a second bedroom over here, it's obvious that you'd have to pay for that. So even non-technical people understand that what they're asking us to do is to bring in, the whole suite of different team members into the project to scope it out, put in the foundation for the other room, right? To put up the drywall and the walls and the windows to this whole different thing, and it also fundamentally changes the flow of how the house goes, right? If instead of walking into the main room and then you can take only a right, now you can take a right and a left. So that changes how people operate in that house. And so it's a pretty simple analogy that I use to describe why it's very important during the blueprint and design phase to really scope out the project and think ahead in terms of features and in the context of building a house. If you think you're going to have kids soon, we need to lay down the foundation for a second room. Because if there's only one room, we're going to have to spend a lot more time and your money building that out. And we can save a lot of money by spending the extra time during the project specification phase and figuring out where we're going to move next.
And that also gets their budget too, right? Because if it's like, nobody ever wants to tell you what their budget is, but if you're like, well, do you want a mansion or a shack,
Ariel, we're kindred spirits, because I used to use the same analogy, but instead of a bedroom, I used to talk about roughing the plumbing in for a second bathroom upstairs or something. So that's so cool that you guys use the same analogy.
That's funny. I thought I was so clever for thinking of that myself.
It's still a good analogy.
It's a great analogy. I love it, man. You're the only other person I've heard that used that. It's awesome.
It works with people who are not highly technical, and
Absolutely.
That's what's important, because sometimes the business decision makers, in other words, the people that are paying me to build something for them, are not the people that are going to understand what it takes to develop or design something highly technical.
The hard thing, though, is that when clients generally get that, they understand when you give the house analogy if it's a complex web project. But then, they might agree up front, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The hard thing is that things change as you're working through the project. And some clients get really upset if, through the process of designing something and maybe they start using it and testing it, they're like, you know what, actually this really isn't working. It should kind of, go the other way. It's just a small little tweak. Just change it. And you're like, well, that's going to cost more money. And then they're like, well, you're charging me more, but this way doesn't work. I don't like it. It's always a hard balance, isn't it?
It definitely is. And, there's not one great answer or silver bullet for that kind of situation. I think in the long term, our goal is to create good products. So occasionally, and probably more often than I'd like, we just have to eat the cost of new development because of the relationship we have with the client, or the mess we've gotten ourselves into. Realistically, it's not possible to charge them for it, and that's okay, because I think organizationally it is in our long-term best interest to sacrifice those few $1,000s or more to create what is a great end product. So I guess our philosophy is to be more generous with our time than maybe we would otherwise, because we've built a reputation of creating a good end product for people, and that's gotten us more business and probably made us more profitable than if we had squeezed the juice out of every single client and said, okay, this is a change order. This is clearly not in the project spec. There's a lot of ways you can be right, but it's much more challenging to do right by a person and by a team. And I think that in the long term is what's more important.
Yeah, because sometimes I think some agencies or teams of people can go a little too far in the other direction, where they kind of nickel and dime every cent they can squeeze out of a client, and then, like you said, it damages the relationship. The client doesn't want to work with you anymore because it's like, it's just a font change. It's one line of code, and they're like, no, that's an extra $1,000,
Yeah, and most of the time people don't realize how challenging the work actually is, and especially when it comes to QA and troubleshooting issues. They say, how long is it going to take to fix this? Or how long is it going to change, or how long is it going to take to change this feature to instead do this? And the reality is I usually don't know, and it'll be very difficult for me to know. So that's always a challenge, but for the most part, we tend not to burden people with change orders or try to do them comprehensively. Say, okay, sign off that this is a change order, that this is going to be the charge for it. We'll do it. We'll do the charge for that at the end of the project, or we can set up a payment plan for it since I know you didn't budget for this. So some flexibility there. And I'm authorized to make those decisions if I see that it's going to be beneficial for the client, and they're clearly getting frustrated with the amount of changes that we're making and the amount of charges that they're getting. There's ways to manage that are going to just keep them happy. Because at the end of the day, people are emotional creatures. We think of ourselves as pretty logical, but we gravitate strongly towards people that make us happy, and relationships, even business relationships, that are just fundamentally pleasurable, right? So if you just set yourself up to be a thorn in their side all the time, that is usually not great for the long-term relationship. Even at big organizations where the decision-making people are totally different from those that are processing those payments, this word gets around. So you don't want to set yourself up that way. But you can always just refer back to the project spec and say, this is clearly an addition. We're going to need to charge you for this because it's outside of the original scope. We have some pretty, I don't want to say ironclad, but we have some pretty clear language in our agreements that says, when you sign off on this project specification, you're saying to us that this is complete to your knowledge. We're not going to go outside of this. And if there's a change or an addition, or if the scope, if the direction that you want to take it changes, that's going to be your responsibility to pay for that. So, and we make that clear.
It's like when you send a client something and they don't change anything. You're just like, here's this design. What do you think? And they're like, it's perfect. It's approved. And they come back with no changes. To me, that's a huge red flag. It means they haven't looked at it, and they're going to come back in a month after they've seen it done, and they're like, I didn't approve this. And like, you just didn't look at it. You just signed off. There should be a law that they have to make at least one change. If they don't, you can't sign off.
I agree. And another sort of huge red flag that this is going to become a fire at some point in the future is when they say something like, this is just going to be a simple change. Or then when I send them the time, they say, this is such a simple change. Why is it going to take that long? Then I realize that I need to do some expectation management, set up a call, talk them through the process, and really explain to them the challenges of retroactively, patching in features or whatever their scope might be.
Yeah, it's like my nephew's a developer, and he said this should be pretty easy to change.
We've had that. We've had a client say that.
Yeah.
Like they're having their nephew who codes, basically oversee what we're doing because, he's the expert. It's like, we'll go hire him.
And he's in junior high school. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, and another thing somewhat related to that, tangentially related, is when people say, I got a quote for this, so why does this quote, they send the one sentence description of a feature to someone that they know peripherally, or someone they found on like Odesk or something, and they get a quote that's a tenth of what we tell them it's going to cost, and of course they get mad, but that's clearly not a true comparison, because that person is totally just spitballing. They have no understanding of what the actual product is. The person that's quoting, that is. And realistically, they're just lowballing to try and lock a new client. And that happens all the time. So generally what I say is, okay, if you get a quote from another person that's lower, send it to me. I'll review it. And we'll try and match that price if we can, if it's a true apples-to-apples comparison. And that generally makes people happy. But for the most part, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, because it's people just saying, yeah, I can add in a messaging feature within this app, no problem. Yeah, it'll be easy. There's a plugin for that or something, and they really don't realize what that work would actually entail.
Well, I mean, that comes down to what clients perceive that they're buying. And I think the hardest thing when you're selling the service of creating web products and mobile apps is that clients think they're buying a product from you. They think you're delivering them a mobile app, and they're actually buying a service. They're buying your consultation, your process, your design. The end result is what you get through by going through that process, and clients don't seem to understand. So like, a mobile app's a mobile app. I can get a mobile app for $1,000 from this person. And it's like, obviously the same thing if you hire a high-priced attorney versus Lionel Hutz. The price is going to be different, but you get what you pay for. It's really hard to make that clear. I mean, is there anything that you can kind of do to inform clients or educate them on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction there between the different the different expectations that people have about what it is to develop software or develop a web app or anything like that. And you're right. I think the paying for the time is a good way to couch that. I think that you never really want to position yourself as an agency as being, the low-cost alternative, because then you're always going to be struggling against a team in Pakistan or something that's going to do it for 1/100th of the price. I mean, you never want to negotiate on price. That's always going to be to your disadvantage, and especially for bigger organizations. So what you want to negotiate then on is quality, right? So what the end product is. And if you pitch it as a service, then you really have to include the value of your time and make it clear. You have to vet yourself as an organization and prove yourself as a group and as individuals. People will ask for resumes and biographies and case studies, previous work, references, the whole thing, and that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I would even take it a step further and say that quality is one thing, but results is even better. Because I'm thinking, like, if you hire, just using the lawyer analogy, and you want to go for this really high-priced attorney to get you off of a murder charge. I don't know what we did to get this charge, but yeah, okay. So, every time I get charged with murder, I always get the best attorney I can. But really what you're buying is, you don't care about necessarily the quality of the legal services. You don't care, like, that they're really fast with getting you documents on time and stuff like that. What you care about is, I'm not going to go to jail for murder.
Just call Sal or Saul.
Saul, yeah, better call Saul, right? So it's the end. That's why you pay those high prices, is you want that big result that the cheap guys can't get you. And I mean, I just think that's a good way to position it.
Yeah, and then I agree. I think that's a really good way to position it. And then if you position yourself that way, you can always have a discussion with the client where they say, okay, why does this cost more money? And you can always bring it back to saying, okay, that's what it's going to cost to get the result that you desire. That is, we're results based. We're not cost based. If you want someone cheaper, go talk to your cousin, right? That's not what we do. We're not the cheapest show in town, and I think that makes sense to people, and also attracts the right type of client that are results oriented. Because if they're price oriented and you're going to price people out, those are the people that aren't prioritizing results to begin with, and that's probably not a great thing as a potential client.
And you said something else earlier about the experience of working with you, because we're emotional creatures, and it's not just all about the results and the bottom line. It's about how do I feel when I'm dealing with this company. And I thought that was a great insight, because I've read, and I don't have the stats in front of me, that it's actually been proven that people will pay more for better customer service. People are willing to shell out more money if they're going to get a better experience, and so that's another reason why you can charge higher prices, because sometimes working with that group from Pakistan, nothing against Pakistan or anybody that works there, but sometimes you can have a bad experience working with very cheap companies.
Yeah, totally. And I think another sort of value add that you can speak to is that if you're truly going for the cheapest thing, the easiest thing to do is to piecemeal the work, but that almost never works out. It's very rare that a project built by lots of different independent groups and essentially project managed by the client creates something awesome. So becoming a full service, we do all of it, we manage all of it, we have the software that will manage all the tasks that need to be done and get us through the project from start to finish is more valuable, I think, than a lot of agencies realize, and that's a big part of why we're successful.
So what are some of those that you touched on? Those the process, the software, like kind of what does an engagement look like with White Rabbit? Let's say let's little role play scenario. You guys are being hired by Proposify to build our mobile app. So what would kind of that process look like from front to back?
Okay, so I'll walk you through that. We have, as I mentioned before, we are a creative agency, but we also do some venture studio work where we are essentially angel investors in small companies. And so the first decision that we'd have to talk about is, what kind of business relationship are we going to have here? Is this going to be a work for hire where you send us the work and we scope it out, send you the price, you agree, pay, we go, sign off, and then we're done? Or is this going to be a partnership, a true, in the sort of business law sense, a true partnership where we become a partner in this business and we underwrite an investment and become a partner? So that would be the first sort of thing. The partnerships are a little more rare, and obviously we vet the client pretty heavily there. But assuming it's a work for hire, so the first step would simply to have those conversations with the client, with you, and discuss your needs and figure out what you're trying to do. So this is the sort of bare bones project scope where we're talking about your needs. If you're a technical person, you're probably going to come at me with expectations about technology, the tech stack, the user flow, the behavior, the desired outcomes, desired integrations or third-party software providers, and that's totally fine. So the gist of this conversation is just to gather as much information as possible from you. So I sort of qualify your level of knowledge about development or marketing or whatever the project is and figure out how much and what type of information I can get from you. And I get as much as I can, because that helps me put together an early stage scope of work that defines what we're actually going to do.
Is your ideal customer very technically proficient or knowledgeable? Would you prefer that, or do you kind of go somewhere mid to low, or people who are just like, I just have an idea and a bunch of money to spend, build it for me? Both
of those are great, honestly. I have great relationships with clients that are really technical, where they come at me with a huge document they have the whole sitemap, user flow, everything spec'd out. They have their budget in mind, and it works with what we want to do. They know what software they need to use. They might even send us some early wireframes or designs. Those are great relationships because I know that I can just talk very clearly and transparently about how it works. I don't have to manage expectations as much. So that's a great type of relationship. And on the other side of the spectrum, where you have someone who just says, Ariel, I would love to build this product. And they send me a one-sentence description and they say, how much is this going to cost? I want to do this. My goal is to create this product or this project or to market my company in this way. What can we do? And that's great too, because then we can position ourselves as a thought leader and provide the expertise, because we have built hundreds and hundreds of different apps and websites and marketing campaigns online. So we know how to make this stuff work. And a lot of times it actually probably would be better if they put more of that responsibility for that in our hands, because many of us have started our own companies. We know exactly how to put things together so that the product itself is scalable, it will grow, it's sellable as a sort of intellectual property and as a business. A lot of us have that experience, and so I really like working with both of those different sides of the spectrum there.
Do you so when you're building like a web product for somebody, or somebody's got an idea for a SaaS app or a mobile app and they want you to build it, do you find you work with them to develop that initial MVP or beta product, get it to market, and then do they kind of have their own, once, let's say they get a little bit of traction, they can get their own technical team on just constant iteration and building it out, or do you kind of stay on and work with them over a period of time? Because as we know, once you launch version 1 of anything, that's when you start realizing all the stuff you should have done differently. That's just part of the process. So where do you guys come in at?
So We do both. We have, my ideal client is one that we build up the technology and it becomes so successful that they have enough money to hire their own internal team, that we become obsolete, because that's awesome, right? We essentially worked as an incubator and created a company from the ground up. That's wonderful, and we love those success stories, and that's happened a handful of times in the last 6 months. So that's a great thing to happen. I'm totally not offended when I am phased out of a project or a company, because that means we did such a good job that they're making enough money to hire their own people. And generally those have become really good relationships anyway, because they still come back to us for stuff. Scaling your own internal team is really challenging, as I'm sure you guys know, with your background as Kyle was telling me before that you guys had an agency that you worked for, and that's how you started Proposify. Yeah. And so I know you guys know how hard it is to find good talent and organize them and create a structure that works and a process that works for them. So especially for people who don't have a development background, if they're just product marketing people, they have a cool product that they're selling and it blows up, and now they actually have to lead a tech team. That's very challenging, and a lot of times they end up coming back anyway, just for help, for guidance, or consulting.
Yeah, I mean, Proposify was easier for us because we already had hired developers and designers and knew the process, and it was actually kind of a luxury and we were being spoiled a bit by just having one product to work on and knowing exactly who we needed for which part of the project. But I can imagine, like, we had clients before at Headspace that they had never even, they might have built a business before, but they didn't understand technology or who to hire, and it was really challenging because they just think like the product you're building is their magic bullet, but they don't do all the other stuff, all the like customer development calls, and really try to understand the marketing side. It's there's a lot to do. It's not just, sometimes they use that, you're building us a mobile app and that's their crutch. Now they can just wait for it to be done.
Yeah, I think one sort of client expectation management thing that you have to do is describe software as a living, breathing thing and not as an end result that's encapsulated in its little box. It's always going to be okay. It's going to be a perfect working product forever. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that, but one of the easiest ways is to say, there's software up that you relate it to their phone, for example. There's a software update, and you have to update your apps all the time. Your phone asks you to update Instagram because Instagram has a new version. Well, someone built that new version, and there's a reason they did that. It's either to create new features or new functionality, or to make it work with the new updates to other technology, make those codependencies work. So people seem to understand that because it's something that they can relate to, even if they're not technical people.
Where it becomes a real challenge is after you launch something and then like a month or two later the client finds a bug, or a user reports a bug, but it was really edge case. It's not it's something you'd have to work to find, and then they're like, well, you should fix that because you built it. And it's like, bugs are part of software.
Yep, that's what I always tell people is, Facebook is done, right? Why does Facebook have 5,000 developers on staff? Yeah. It's not because Facebook is done, right? So, but you're right. And what I encourage people to do is to seriously set aside time and money for support and maintenance after the project is completed. So they really need to consider that. At minimum, if they just want to sustain their project and not have to add new things or update it, maybe 30 hours a month might be reasonable, just because of all the changes. And it depends on the complexity of the project, but that's typically what I would suggest to the average client, let's say. Just if I didn't know what their project was, that's what I would suggest. And I'd strongly encourage that. And you need to be very clear that, we don't work for free. We're not gonna support this infinitely, because that costs money. And especially, when you finish a project and you're done with the code and you're finished with it, getting back into it, and your programmer who has since moved on to other projects coming back into it, relearning the logic, it takes more time than even it would otherwise. So it becomes even more expensive to fix things if you don't have some sort of at least monthly support agreement.
Totally. I could even see making that mandatory or just building it in and being like, you're buying it. Too bad. If you want to build something, you need a budget for maintenance after.
Yeah, and you can always use a house analogy there. Like your appliances are going to break. That's not something that you can control, and even the best appliances break, period. Your car breaks down. You need to do oil changes. The things that are really well constructed still need love all the time, and people seem to understand that as well.
I once had a client say that when he didn't want to have to pay for bug fixes like 3 months after it was built, that he said that I sold him a sailboat without a sail. Remember that?
I sure do.
That was pretty insulting.
Tough client. I remember him.
What did you do? What did you do there?
I told him to fuck off and I hung up. That actually happened, but that didn't happen a lot.
They knew each other. It was a uncommon case.
Man, I thought for a second there I just felt empowered, and I really wanted to do that.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not great for keeping that relationship, going strong. But
yeah. That's another interesting thing, and I want to ask you a question. I know you're interviewing me, but I want to ask you a question anyway.
Sure.
Screw it. So, have you guys first of all, have you ever fired a client? And second of all, how and why?
Let's go back to Dartmouth, when we had our office there, when that the troll, remember?
The troll.
We won't say his name.
His last name rhymed with troll.
Yeah, we're not going to go any further, but and he was screaming at our account person and just obnoxious. So Kyle, if I remember correctly, got on the horn and fired him, and he just went off. And I know that Amy...
He asked who I was. He was like, who are you? And I was like, that's an odd question. You hired us.
And then Amy was very taken by that, because she said in a lot of big agencies she would have been thrown under the bus, but instead we fired him.
We just didn't have a lot of time for bullshit for people, but we also weren't a tremendously, successful agency. So
it was very small
maybe
at that time.
Maybe I shouldn't have written so many rackygrams. That's what it was called when I would write a strongly worded email to a client who's being an asshole, as I would write what everybody else called a rackygram.
Because his last name's Racky, yeah.
Yeah, but
well, hopefully I never get a rackygram.
Yeah, well, I certainly wouldn't want a Castrogram.
No, you definitely don't want that.
Well,
don't be raising my voice. It happens so infrequently, but you don't want that.
I've been Kyle's partner for a long time, and he's mellowed out a lot now that he's out of the service business.
That's true.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. I have to say, it's 99% customer service. Yeah. I would say more than anything else. That's how I would define my work.
Would you agree that the customer isn't always right, though?
Oh, all the time.
Great.
I would say the customer is usually wrong.
Let's just say the customer's never right. They're always wrong.
Yes.
No.
Yes, I can say with certainty, the customer is never right.
You know what's great about
what's
great about this podcast is, of course, our target audience are agencies, and they're just going to be like cheering. They're going to love this.
Well, the thing is,
they get it.
If clients had all the answers, they wouldn't need an agency, right?
That's true.
They shouldn't know everything, but some just don't want to admit that.
I don't want to fix my car. I don't know how to fix my car. You know what I mean? It's like you hire specialists to do their job, and if they do it well, then you benefit immensely from it.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
That's true. Yeah. And most of the time, you just have to take leadership of those types of situations and say, this is not the right way. And you can say, okay, we're going to proceed with the way that you're suggesting, and for the record, and actually get it on the record, I don't think this is a good idea, and I think this is going to cause problems down the line. And make sure that that's documented somewhere so that they don't come back later and say, whoa, what's going on here? This is not what I wanted, or this is not the outcome I was looking for.
That's where emails are very useful, because when you can send it through an email, like, just for the record, I don't agree with this, and then, when they come back later and they were wrong, you've got it documented, like you said.
Yes. The problem, though, is that with particularly sticky clients, they realize that is your preferred method of documentation, and then they go out of their way to give you a call at 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Yeah, they try to just catch you off guard, and I guess then it's always great too. But sending those follow-up emails like, so just as we discussed on our call, you want to do this, and
Can I ask you a self-serving question? We kind of sidetracked you when we were going on the process, and you were talking about how you have that meeting and scope it, and then from there, obviously, you probably write a proposal. What do you guys use for proposal writing?
Proposify.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Kevin honestly didn't know.
Oh.
He wasn't just baiting you into like promoting our app.
Proposify. Thumbs up. Wink. No, I actually do use Proposify.
Okay.
And other things as well. So it depends on what I'm doing. In general, Proposify is great for RFPs and proposals where I don't have to do a lot of graphic design work. And then occasionally I use Proposify when I have to, do like a government website RFP, for example, or a travel agent, or some sort of more official, one of those big 70 pagers that takes forever.
Yes.
I do those. Those are really fun. And Proposify is great for that because I just the drag and drop features. And then for more graphic design heavy, where I'm actually pitching a campaign, like a marketing campaign, or there's some graphic elements. I want to do a storyboard or something like that. Generally, I farm that out to someone much more talented than me on my team and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you mock this up, please? And they'll use InDesign or Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever the case might be.
We used to use InDesign at the agency.
Yeah. InDesign is good, but it takes forever. I mean,
yes.
It's really pretty slow when it comes to making proposals. And I can make some really cool stuff on there, but if I put the amount of effort that would create the product that I'm proud of in InDesign, I literally would do nothing else with my time every week. Yeah. Because it's just so time consuming to make something really badass on it.
Well, and the hard thing is when you've got and this is the reason why we made Proposify, is when you want to go back and like, what was that proposal I wrote 6 months ago? I did that nice flow chart, and then you got to go find it in Dropbox or on a shared server, open it up, copy and paste the pages. Like, it was just a huge headache to collaborate on even.
Yes, and you have to go through the old server catacombs and do a crawl through a blast through the past to find old case studies and whatever. Yeah, that's a big pain.
I like the analogy, the catacombs.
The catacombs. I like the
it
blast
is the
from
catacombs.
The dark area.
Do you guys not have a catacombs in your office? I thought that was pretty standard for creative agencies and software as a service companies.
We don't have catacombs, but that's what we're going to now call the archive system in Proposify. It's going to call, do you want to put this in the catacombs?
That'd be good. Protect it with skeletons, cobwebs. I mean, really make it the whole 9 yards, because that's what it feels like when I'm trying to go in there and find some old InDesign thing I made 8 years ago.
Well, I think we're out of time, but I want to really thank you for being on the show, Ariel. Thank you for getting drunk nice and early for us. And
it is absolutely my pleasure.
Awesome.
This has been a great one, and like I said, I mean, the people out there listening that are with agencies and whatnot are going to love it.
We hope so.
Great. And you know what? I love this stuff. I love talking about this. I have a lot more to say, man. We could just keep this going all day. I would love to, but I know you guys have to go. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we'll do it again, definitely.
Have a great weekend. Happy Friday.
All right.
Yeah. Take care.
Cheers.
You too, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
So good interview with Ariel Castro. I thought it was interesting to hear how they would sometimes invest. They were like angel investors in some of their clients. That's kind of an interesting approach.
Yeah, and I think reading between the lines, I think a lot of their investment maybe is a trade for services.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope, isn't it?
I think it is.
Well, I'm sure it works for them, but I know we always had that in our agency. Was people would come to us with ideas for apps they want to build, and they'd be like, can you do it for free, but I'll give you shares in my company? And we're like, well, okay, so we'll just pull from this imaginary, well of funds that we don't have to pay everyone's salaries and keep the lights on. It doesn't work.
But it was the attitude a lot of these people had. Like, my idea is amazing, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to partner with me. That's how they would approach it.
Right.
You're going, really?
They don't realize ideas are not really that great.
No
ideas are that great. The thing with ideas, I mean, we could do a whole separate show on this, but it's just that an idea is like maybe 10%, and the rest is all execution.
I feel a blog post coming on for you. This is a good topic.
Perhaps, because
remember this.
Think of some of the most successful SaaS products that we think of today. Everyone uses the example of Slack. I'll use Slack because they're a really good example. Instant chat, team chat, been around forever. Not that great an idea. If somebody came to us and said, I'm going to do a team chat app, we'd be like, that's kind of a generic idea. They executed it.
Yeah, in the rework book, they talk about that.
Yes.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah, even with our app, I mean, proposal apps existed. There's competitors, but, we do it a little bit differently. Yep. Not to toot our own horn, but, maybe it's another topic for another day.
Yes.
So let's sign off for now. I want to, as always, remind people, please get involved if you think you would want to be on the show, be interviewed. If you have a lesson to share with some agency owners, please get in touch. And also remember, sometimes I have people ask me this, you do not need to be a Proposify customer to be on the show. So don't feel like you have to.
Very true.
We're open to having anybody who has something cool to share. And that's it for this week.
Goodbye.
You have a great weekend.